I'm David Hepworth. Thanks for clicking this Word in Your Ear podcast, videocast, thing for which there is no name. Mark Ellen and I have been creating in this line since 2007. And if any of it has met with your approval, then please click to subscribe because it helps. Leave a comment because we like to hear from you, and maybe even consider becoming a Patreon supporter because then, well, you'll be one of us. Visit patreon.com/wordinyour-ear for details.
You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Ozzy Osbourne.
Well, that was extraordinary, wasn't it? Because it was only days after his final show.
It's the ultimate case of the kind of trooper determined to push it to the last day, isn't it? Absolutely
it really was
extraordinary.
I saw a clip of it, and there he was, brought up on a hydraulic lift in his throne, wheeled out for his various songs. He was really good, actually, but he looked so frail. Couldn't stand up. I mean, they must have been well aware that he might not have even made it to that event, which had been planned a while ago. And maybe they had some kind of contingency. I don't know. But it's brilliant that at least he managed to see it out. That's a proper farewell, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Yeah. Beat that, back in your own backyard kind of thing. It's, it's absolutely extraordinary. I've been refreshing my memory about. I wrote a chapter I wrote a book about the rise and fall of the rock star, and I had a chapter about Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh, it's brilliant about where they get their name and everything.
They get the name from. I think they're called Earth at the time.
Yeah, which
is the kind of classic uninspired rock band name, isn't it? Bruce Springsteen had a group called Earth at the same time. It's never going anywhere. A group called Earth,
isn't it?
It's just
doesn't move, just sits there,
just sits there, and they were going nowhere, and they were unloading their gear outside some youth centre or whatever in the area of Birmingham, and they noticed a marquee in a cinema across the way that an Italian horror film was playing, and the English name of that horror film was Black Sabbath. And they thought, well, that's good. That's interesting, and they talked about the fact that some people, you normally think of entertainment as being intended to kind of delight people, to lighten their heart, to take them somewhere,
lift their mood,
take them to a happy place. But on the other hand, there is also a seam of entertainment that is intended not to do anything of the kind. It's to take you to a dark place. And therefore, if they call themselves Black Sabbath, they could do that. And so they started with the name. And then once they had the name, that suddenly gave what they did focus. And what's the first song that they wrote once they had the name? It's a song called Black Sabbath.
On an album called Black Sabbath, wasn't it?
Later, it was on an album called Black Sabbath. Not much later, I suppose. There was a very key shift in terms of popular music, really. Because when he died, I got the usual sort of phone calls from broadcasters when you come on to talk about Ozzy Osbourne. I couldn't really talk about Ozzy Osbourne at all, really, other than to say that what Black Sabbath did was massively significant. There's no doubt about that.
Incredibly significant.
But it personally never appealed to me at all, but I don't doubt that it appealed to an awful lot of people. I don't know if I've ever told you the story of, so I go to college in 1968. I go in September 1968. I trot off to college. And my records at the time were, Beatles records, Stones records, Bob Dylan records, Animals records, I don't know what. And then I was still in hall the second year when the new intake arrived. And the new intake included a bloke called, I can see him now, I can tell you his name. It was called Mick Lana. He came from the Midlands. He had a curtains of hair, either side, and
which he parted to speak
in a kind of slow, lugubrious,
cigarette,
faintly quizzical Birmingham way, and he had some records, and he set up his record player, and I heard drifting down the hall as he was organising his collection of gonks or whatever, into some semblance of order. I heard the opening track of Black Sabbath. I'd never heard it before. And as it breaks into the refrain, it's kind of very slow, very ponderous. It's like a Hammer horror thing. And then when it kind of breaks out, it has the voice of Ozzy going, "Oh no, God help me." And my only response, genuinely, I can remember this really clearly.
Laughter.
Was laughter. I just thought, that's funny. And I've been thinking about this ever since. Because it's just interesting what a shift took place in just that generation, just that 1 year generation difference. Because everything I'd grown up with, all the music I liked, all derived in some way from American R&B. It just did. It was dance music. It was love songs. It was all that kind of stuff, And then suddenly you've got somebody trying to summon up the atmosphere of a kind of medieval graveyard or something. You think, what? What's happened to pop music here? How could this possibly be entertainment?
Brought it home, isn't it?
How could this possibly be entertainment except in the kind of Benny Hill fashion, But to a whole generation who came along at that time, Black Sabbath were enormous. And and there was Deep Purple and there was all that stuff and all that kind of doomy bloke stuff about, you can't imagine how dark my imaginings are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was the stance of that music.
This is the inner me.
This is the inner me.
But it's so influential. You think about it. Obviously Metallica and Guns N' Roses and Iron Maiden. Obviously, except they wouldn't be around without someone like Black Sabbath. But I also think there's an element of that glam thing. There's Alice Cooper, there's Motley Crue, The Damned. Would The Damned have happened? I don't know. Sisters of Mercy. Even people like that the goth concept was something that came from them. Was it Ozzy and his eyeliner and with his crucifixes? It's incredibly influential.
More influential than all of that, more significant than all of that, Mark, is popular music would not be dominated by the black T-shirt were it not for Black Sabbath.
Yeah,
the black T-shirt is the internationally recognized sign of the kind of the person who identifies with the dark side, whether they're a 65-year-old, retired teacher in Droitwich or a 19-year-old runaway in California. It's a way of advertising your edginess, isn't it?
And don't you think Ozzy kind of was responsible for some of that blueprint of what a rock star kind of is? That kind of rock stars gooning, the quad bikes, the toys, the kind of permanent adolescence. A lot of that's just, I think, derives from Ozzy. There was an extraordinary clip I saw just the other night. I don't know what I was looking for, but I found Paul McCartney, the moment Paul McCartney first meets Ozzy Osbourne. Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't.
It's really brilliant. For some reason, somebody's filming it. And of course, Ozzy is a huge Beatles fan, massive Beatles fan. Meets him and he's really overcome. And there's this awkward pause and McCartney being a brilliant conversationalist just goes, the burglary. And he's bringing up the fact that Ozzy was apprehended, wasn't he? I think at the age of 16 for stealing a bike.
He went
His father would not bail him out as a punishment. Wouldn't have said, if you're going to jail for 6 weeks, you're going to jail for 6 weeks. That might teach you not to do it again. But McCartney reminds him of the key element in this felony. Do you remember what it was?
No, go on.
That Ozzy was bright enough to wear gloves. He was told, if you're going to do a baby, wear gloves. But he wore fingerless gloves. So when the fingerprinting team arrive, there's one guy that they can certainly figure out. And McCartney reminds him of it. And Ozzy kind of shrugs in that kind of hopeless kind of, I'm lumbered with this all my life, you know. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, and I suppose that was still going on, wasn't it, years later with the Osbournes?
Yeah. Because
that was not how do you live with your super cool father, you know, who's a rock star. It was how do you live with your father who's a bit of a mess because he's a rock star, you know?
Yeah.
And it's extraordinary that it's a lifetime performance, that is, being Ozzy Osbourne, you know, from the age of, I don't know, 16, 17 or something, through to whatever age he was when he passed away. It's an absolutely extraordinary thing.
And you also think how much he had that kind of working class element of just desperate to escape.
Oh, yeah.
I was reading one of the obits and it reminded me that he's from a family that was 6 kids.
Yeah.
6 kids, 2 parents in a 2-bedroom house.
Catholic family, interestingly, for some new stuff is in the group called Black Sabbath.
Yes. Yes. That's the thing.
It's just
but also one of those examples of somebody who was managed by stroke saved by his life.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of, there's some very obvious examples of people like Tom Waits or whatever, to some extent Keith Richards, people are kind of run, operated by their wives, and they create this kind of space. Yoko Ono, really good example. Just create this case. I'll look after the kind of business, and you can freewheel around it inside, and you're free to be John Lennon.
You can continue to be a child. Now that is the. Now let's be honest, Mark. You don't have to be a rock star to be involved in this kind of bargain. It's the basis of so many marriages.
So many marriages. Somebody's kind of broadly in charge, making decisions, has built a kind of framework inside which we operate. I think we're all familiar with this, and it's great. So I feel some sympathy.
It's just extraordinary. That it's just gone on so long, and that when he passed away, he gets more ink, as you would say.
Big national news story. He's so well known.
If he died in 1974 or whatever, none of this,
no,
you wouldn't get that kind of coverage at all.
Yeah.
It would just been another guy in a rock band.
Another little fact that I was reminded of, which is a theme. Actually, we'll probably get onto this later when we're going to talk about the Jaws at 50 documentary. But it just fascinates me, the things that go wrong that can be turned to your advantage. And one of the key things about the sound of Black Sabbath was that Tony Iommi tuned his guitar down, didn't he?
Because he couldn't press that, because he'd lost
to the
part
top
of his fingers in an industrial accident. Yes, don't forget. Here's another thing that cannot be stressed too highly. At the age of 15, 16, all 4 of them were doing jobs, horrible, difficult,
terrible
greasy,
jobs,
dangerous jobs. In a way that
Tony Iommi was in a sheet metal factory and lost the top of his 2 fingers.
Yeah.
For which he probably got no compensation. Or maybe he got a couple of days off or a free sandwich or something.
Yes.
But anyway, because it was so painful and so difficult, he'd lowered the strings, which made this kind of doomy, twangy sound. And that, of course, was one of the reasons that they sounded like the way they did. So it's just one of those strange things where you can twist a kind of bit of a disaster into some kind of victory. Really interesting, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, Ozzy Osbourne, we shall not see his like again.
This is Word in Your Ear, from Aardvark to ZZ Top and back again.
So, I went to the cinema the other day. Me and the good lady wife went to the cinema. Now, you might think that means that we're going to catch up with the latest blockbuster. You would be wrong, Monk. What did we go and see at the cinema? We went to see Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon, which has just been re-released because it's 50 years old.
Good film.
This year. Absolutely amazing film. I love that film. And of course, I'd never seen it on a big screen. And and it's 3 hours long, which normally I absolutely
There's a
load
break.
up.
If I remember rightly, at the
There's an
beginning of the break,
intermission.
it says Part 2, continuing account of the misfortunes
Yeah.
and disasters which befell Barry Lyndon.
There
Which
you
is
go.
so brilliant.
And the intermission doesn't come halfway. It's kind of oddly,
Yeah.
it's 2/3 of the way through the thing. Anyway, there were a bunch of sort of 25-year-old American students sitting in front of us, and when we went outside afterwards, the 25-year-olds were all arguing about how it could have been shorter. You know, that if he'd gone off with so-and-so and he killed so-and-so quicker or whatever. And I was
more explosions.
I was almost tempted to be one of those kind of eccentric old persons who passes them and goes and taps somebody on the shoulder and tells them something, you know.
You can invent a new fast show character here.
Because it's neither here nor there what happens in the plot, because it's all about what it looks like. And the reason the film is 3 hours long is because it's what it looks like. It unveils these extraordinary kind of Irish landscapes and these kind of, you know, Palladian interiors. And it's just absolutely astonishing. But the thing that struck me, and I didn't say anything to them, was you don't get it because you're 25. And in the same way, we didn't get it when we were 25 when it came out, which is why it passed without really any
I
proper
remember
recognition.
actually being quite sourly dismissed, actually.
Yes.
I don't think it was part. I think people really objected. I think critics really had a go. But we saw it again about maybe 10 years ago, and I thought it was fantastic. A, it looks extraordinary.
Oh, it's so extraordinary.
And B, one of the central cores of the film is a trope that has continued very successfully many times, which is very beautiful men in military jackets.
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah.
Sergeant Troy to Sean Bean, whatever. A man, it's the Jimi Hendrix military jacket, isn't
Yes,
it?
the ladies are like a man in uniform.
They're
don't
like
they?
a man in uniform.
And it was Ryan O'Neill at the time. But it was fantastic to see it. And it just struck me, when I was 25, if I'd have sat there in front of it, I would have thought, it's a bit slow. I don't get this.
Yeah.
Whereas you watch it now, you think, oh, this is just absolutely astonishing. And of course, another reason why it got rather dismissed is it appeared in the same summer as Jaws, which of course is also celebrating its 50th birthday this year. And there's, you and I never need any second bidding to talk about Jaws or to watch it.
I can't think how many times I've seen it. If it was on this afternoon, I would just, if it was on the telly, I'd stop, wouldn't you?
Well, Mark, it is on the telly because it's on Netflix, isn't it? You know, it's on everybody's telly.
It's
You
true.
watch it any time you like, and I watch it absolutely regularly. But there's a documentary on, I think it was on Disney, isn't it? or
It's
something?
Disney, yeah.
Jaws of 50, featuring Spielberg and a lot of people who took part in it. And it's just really interesting to be reminded
Fantastic.
what a disaster it appeared to be as Spielberg was trying to make it. You know, young, relatively untried filmmaker tries making a film on water. And, you know, as he says, anything on water takes 3 times as long as it takes on land, and probably won't go right in the first place. And it just appeared that his career was absolutely going to go nowhere after this film. And of course, even when he came out, it was a huge success. He had to go and pretty much live in a dark room for 6 months, didn't he? Because he just had so much pressure, so much pain while making it. He could barely bring himself to look at it.
Yeah, he was sort of going through these sort of panic attacks and hyperventilating, wasn't he? And I think was he 24, 25?
27.
27, okay, but really young to be handling something with that size budget. There's a moment in it where he says, one of the actors, he won't say who the actor is, but one of the actors comes up to him and says, I feel I ought to tell you, you probably know, that that everybody in the industry is saying that because you're so over budget, because you're so beyond time, you'll never work again. And he says it was pretty extraordinary that an actor would actually tell him that, not only from the point of view of the personal, distress that would cause your confidence, but the idea that this actor obviously thought, he's so doomed, I will never see him again. You don't know who that actor is, but There's a juxtaposition, isn't it? The moment he says that, you then go straight to a picture of him with Brody, don't you?
Roy Scheider.
So it may well have been him.
God, it must have been him. But the other thing that brings home to me, which I suppose I was aware of, but it was never front of mind, is that in Jaws, there's actually only about 7 actors.
Yeah.
The obvious ones.
The 3 guys on the boat, Brody's wife.
The mayor, the girl who's attacked by the shark at the beginning. Those are all actors. Everybody else is an islander. Is somebody
They were locals from Martha's Vineyard.
The kids on the beach, the people going out on the shark hunt.
The people in the scene when they meet the mayor, they're not actors. They're actually locals, just given 1 or 2 lines, And it's brilliant. I totally agree, because for some reason, if they had been actors, either you might have recognised them, even subconsciously, or they would have looked different, or they would have moved differently. But there's something completely authentic about those beach scenes, where it makes it feel like a documentary, as if it is absolutely real.
It is. In fact, I'm going to go off and watch it again this afternoon.
It's amazing.
To pay more attention to that stuff. And of course, it's not about the shark at all.
Not about the shark.
Because he says, doesn't he say that when they were shooting the opening sequence where the girl goes off swimming off the beach, which of course everybody remembers, the shark wasn't available, was it?
Well, it wasn't quite ready. This is another interesting thing. They had to start early because there was an industrial strike coming up. There was a film industry strike, and they thought, if we start early, we can get ahead of that. So they start early. The shark isn't ready. They realised they'd have to shoot that opening scene with no shark. And they do it with that system of pulleys that drags her through the water, which is incredibly unsettling, actually.
Oh, God.
Really, really frightening. And he realised at that point that actually that was probably more terrifying than if you saw the shark, which was a good thing, because when the shark arrives, made at vast expense, there are 3 sharks, aren't they, made by the people who made the giant squid in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, best possible people in the business. When the shark arrives, it only very intermittently works. It's a bit where Richard Dreyfuss is talking about getting on the boat every day, and he hears the radio cracking. Shark is mechanical failure, not available today. And one day they say, shark working. They go, really? My God, and they actually have to use it. But that's the thing that's so scary. It's the pictures from the point of view of the shark, of the legs above it. It's the barrels being dragged through the water. It's when you can't actually see it. It's absolutely amazing, I think.
It's a classic case of, the great truth. Limitations are always strengths.
Yeah.
Just always.
Yeah.
If you can have all the special effects in the world, you use all the special effects in the world, and therefore they are kind of devalued.
Because if you made that film now, you'd want to see every graphic detail of those kind of attacks, which is not as scary. It's the fact you're filling in with your own imagination. Yeah. The other thing, of many things that just really worked, the cell lines were amazing, I think. The one that we remember was just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, but the original line, I think, was...
Was that Jaws 2, though?
Oh, was that?
Surely
maybe that was Jaws
must
2.
Have been Jaws.
Oh, maybe that was Jaws 2. So the original line for the first one was "See it before you go swimming."
Oh, right.
And that's a really good line, because we're all involved. This somehow impacts everybody's world, doesn't it? We all go swimming, and I can remember, as to everybody else, going swimming after seeing that film, and that thing where you look down and saw dark patches of seaweed and things, even if you were kind of in Brighton.
Filey.
That's right. You think, oh my God.
You're in Tenby.
I know.
One of the places you're least likely to see a shark.
Great white.
Margate.
I know. There were so many bits. Another bit where they talk about the competition between the actors. There's the 3 actors, obviously. In the script, they're competing, aren't they? When they're on the boat, they're competing to kind of have sway and have power and run the whole thing. And in real life, they were also competing to have the most impact in the dramatic scenes. And he said that really, really helped. Another brilliant thing was the introduction. They can't think what the motivation is for Shaw's character. And they decide that he was going to have been on the boat, the Indianapolis that goes down.
And that was not in the book.
Not in the
script. It was somebody suggested it.
Somebody suggested they wrote it, and then Robert Shaw himself took it home, and as he was a writer anyway, and rewrote it into a tiny little sequence.
It made it shorter.
7 minutes long, or 6 minutes long. And that's another absolutely extraordinary thing in the script. We are there at night, and it's claustrophobic and it's terrifying, and there's things outside. And he talks about the death of these people on the boat from all these sharks. It's absolutely brilliant.
And obviously Robert Shaw, just a complete piss artist, wasn't he?
Yeah, gets so drunk he has to apologise, doesn't he? He says, is it all right if I have a drink on the set? Spielberg idiotically goes, yeah, fine, not realising he's incapacitated. Amazing.
But he's got that gear, hasn't he, Robert Shaw, in his acting, that he is the most frightening man on the boat. You know what I mean?
Completely.
Roy Scheider's pretty good, but when Shaw weighs in, it's as if they discovered another register. It's like the instrument has discovered another bunch of octaves beneath what they've already done. It's extraordinary. And as I say,
and the end of the shark as well. That's one other thing which I'd not taken on board. That they're trying to think how the film should end, and then somebody, it's not Spielberg, I can't remember who it says, you got to blow the shark up. So, you can't blow the shark up. No, you can't. Otherwise, it's not a sufficiently conclusive ending. You've got to remember, everybody has invested so much in this terrifying creature. In fact, it invented the whole idea of sharks, this kind of killer machine, which we hadn't really thought about before. They were just kind of, dangerous creatures that you were never going to encounter. They said, it's got to be blown up, it's got to be conclusive. And I thought it was really clever, because if they just shot it, or I don't know, it'd have been harpooned or something like that, or chopped up. But it had to end with a gigantic explosion with bits of shark flying.
It's got to go up in the air, hasn't it? It can't just sink, because you wouldn't believe that.
No, you've got to see it exactly.
You've got to see it come up
in the air, explode in the air, and then we can all breathe.
We're all fine. We'll all go home.
As do the two guys who swim back to the shore, and you think, well, they can do that now because there is no shark beneath them. Genius! I'd never thought of that. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Do you know what the most frightening bit in films is? Shall I tell you?
Go on.
Because I realised this recently that when my youngest daughter was watching Hitchcock's Rear Window.
Oh yeah.
So Rear Window, where James Stewart is in a wheelchair, and he starts to notice that out of his back window of his apartment block that there is some nefarious goings on in the facing block, and is the character played by Raymond Burr up to no good? Is he disposing of his wife or whatever? And the whole film just has Jimmy Stewart looking through binoculars across at the other guy, and my daughter still talks about the most frightening moment in films is the moment where Raymond Burr realizes he's being looked at.
He turns and looks directly towards you.
Looks to you. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And she jumped out of her seat, and I happened to be catching Bill Hader, the American comedian and film director, talking the other day about his teenage daughters had watched the film, and the same moment, the exact same moment.
It is terrifying.
It's terrifying. Nothing awful happens.
Also, you think one of the reasons it's terrifying is you think that James Stewart is incapacitated.
Yes.
He's in a chair. So Rainbow could come down the fire escape, across the thing, up the steps,
and also
Grace Kelly, and murder him.
Grace Kelly's in his apartment at the same time.
That's right.
So it's maximum hazard,
Yeah.
And it's just the beauty of it, the genius in terms of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Hitchcock, who famously used to script absolutely every shot. So he always used to say he didn't even need to be there when they made the film, because if they followed the instructions, it would be right. What is Alfred Hitchcock always dressed in on a film set? A 3-piece suit.
Yeah,
that's what he's wearing, because he's not going to get dirty. He's not going to get down on his hands and knees. It's all in the script, and the nerve to realize if that shot works, the whole film works. And all it is Raymond Burr just looks up, looks straight down the lens, realization on his face, your realization in the audience, Jimmy Stewart's realization, all at the same time. It's absolutely masterful. So that's
a total masterpiece.
It is.
Can I mention another TV thing or another film thing? Yeah, just while we're on it.
Yeah,
mixtape. Did I mention this to you the other day? This thing,
Go
Mixtape.
on.
It's a mini-series the BBC is showing at the moment. I thought it's really interesting because Mixtape, hence the name, is about a couple who meet in 1989 and fall in love as teenagers, and their romance, they're both at school, is executed via the furtive exchange in school bags, in school lockers, of little cassettes that they've made of songs. And the story builds around there, then starting 20-odd years later to send each other little, MP3 files, just texting files of the songs they used to listen to. The Fall and the Psychedelic Furs, and Love Song by The Cure, and Fool's Gold by the Stone Roses, and Comsat Angels and all that. And it did strike me that was a particularly extraordinary moment between about what would have been 85 and 95, the time of the cassette, and the time when people made individual tapes. You and I are too old to have done that to potential girlfriends or whatever. We did it I made them for friends and for offices and for car journeys with the kids, and I made tapes. But the idea of making those romantic tapes, of which there was only one copy, and if you put the wrong song on the third song, you finish the whole thing, you couldn't change, you couldn't just click it out and drop another file in. It's done. It's an analog thing. And then the characterful handwriting on the cassette box, and the names for the cassettes even, and the way you decorated them. And I thought it was really interesting. It made it very plausible, actually. I thought it was very good, this TV series. It was really fantastic. And it's very plausible that the couple have had such a strong, powerful connection through music. And I couldn't think of if that was the same since. I don't know. I can't imagine that simply sending somebody a file could in any way have the kind of connection.
Well, you don't even send them a file, do you? You send them a link.
A link to a file.
They can get to the same.
I know.
As we keep saying, we've all got the same record collection nowadays. What's interesting in the light of what you just said is I have over there in a corner, I've got more than one cardboard box absolutely full of compilation cassettes that I have not touched for, I don't know, 30 years probably, And no doubt, if I got them out, and I'll have to get the cassette. I've got a cassette player still down there. I think it still works. And if I put them on, it would no doubt take me back in a Proustian manner to the actual, pretty much the week when you made them.
Oh, absolutely. Because
it's a combination of those particular elements at that particular time, isn't it? Do you remember? Nick Stewart, who we know, Nick Stewart, the captain.
His Island Records, the man who signed you.
A&R man, whatever. He used to, when he worked at Ireland, he used to do a thing, I don't know, every month.
It's called the Captain's Log.
The Captain's Log. He used to do a little cassette. And they were generally a combination of just stuff he liked and a couple of things he wanted to plug or whatever.
Yeah.
And loads of people did that kind of thing, didn't they? They were like little newspapers, weren't they? Because it's that connection with a time, which I think will be one of the interesting things about if I ever went back to listen to them again. But as I say, I've got hundreds probably.
Oh, yeah. And the feeling of satisfaction when you completed one. I can remember just working in offices, I guess it would have been Q or Mojo, and people coming in, me included, with tapes they'd made that they wanted to play in the office and desperately looking for some kind of approval that it was cool enough. Yes. The Mojo tapes got more and more competitive. People come in always with demos from Nick Drake demos, Syd Barrett demos. We never did anything everything kind of mainstream and obvious. It's like the character in High Fidelity, the Jack Black character. Doesn't he come into the shop one morning with a new tape he's made and slaps it on and starts with, I can't remember what it is. I think it's Walking on Sunshine by Katrina and the Waves. But he's engineered this, and he doesn't really want anyone to do any work. He wants them to stop and just listen to his tape.
That's true. So the person who puts it on, particularly in the old music magazine office, which is a kind of hyper competitive environment when it comes to that kind of thing, they're carrying on with their work with an outward display of insouciance, but desperately inside, hoping that somebody is going to say, round about track 4, was this?
Yeah, someone's going to say, well, is this what I think it is? Is this an outtake from Good Vibrations? I can't, but where did you get that? You know?
They're desperately hoping somebody's going to be asked. The worst possible fate is if the whole thing goes by and nobody says anything.
Nobody says anything. The great Jim Irvin at Mojo, I can remember him putting Nina Simone's version of Randy Newman's Baltimore on one of his tapes, and it being an absolute bullseye hit. And everyone just stopped and said, "What? This is fantastic." Jane, oh yeah. Great. Yeah, I kind of prefer earlier stuff actually, but yeah. Oh, I thought you might like it, so I go that kind of immense superiority, you know. But that's how I first heard that track. It's brilliant.
Yeah. I'll look out for that. So this week we talked to. I was very excited to talk to the great Peter Gralnick. American author of loads of my favorite books about music, Feel Like Going Home and Sweet Soul Music and all kinds of things, and the great 2-part biography of Elvis Presley, what's it called, Last Train to Memphis and Careless Love, I think they're called. And he's written a book about the relationship between Presley and Colonel Tom Parker, based on the fact that he got access to Parker's entire archive of letters, and Parker clearly belonged to the, what do we call it, the epistolary age, didn't he? You know, so everything he thought said, he wrote down long letters, dictated them to typists,
and was kept. Obviously,
everything was kept. And it was fascinating to talk to him about why Elvis never came to Britain or anywhere outside the United States, apart from Hawaii and Canada. I think we've had this as a trivia question in the past, haven't we? He only played twice. He only performed twice outside of mainland America, and once was in Hawaii and once was in Canada. That was the law.
That's it. And only set foot in Britain, I think, at Prestwick Airport.
On the way back, I think.
Well, his plane was refueling. That's right.
Yeah, coming back from military service in Germany. And there's been all kinds of theories as to why he didn't. Some of them based on the fact that Colonel Tom Parker was a Dutchman whose immigration status in the United States was less than certain.
Well, a man who arrived in America stowed away on a boat.
Yeah,
so he didn't exactly have the right papers.
Yeah, but the thing that Peter says, that having talked to loads of people around Elvis and the Colonel and the Mafia and, you know, all these mates and everybody, that in the end, people would always say, there's a plan to tour Elvis. We've got a good offer from so-and-so. What about this? What about that? And say, yeah, I'll tell you, I'll talk to Elvis about it. Elvis never raised the subject ever.
No.
Because Elvis clearly had no intention of going anywhere other than the United States, which I think is really interesting.
It's a revelation, because if you look at that Baz Luhrmann film, we talk about that in the podcast, the Baz Luhrmann film, Elvis, that you and I went to see, the central thrust of it is the idea that this controlling, slightly mean-spirited, self-interested man stops him going off on world tours, etc., because he can't leave the country and he wouldn't want him to tour without him. This turns out to be absolute nonsense.
Well,
loads of people the Colonel would have trusted to be the tour manager. There were loads of offers on the table from people who brought the Beatles to Japan, the people who toured with the Moody Blues and all sorts of bands, and they offered him huge amounts of money, but Elvis is the one who doesn't want to go. And one of the reasons they're worried is security, isn't it?
Yes,
the idea of security meaning, can Elvis get through customs when he's carrying A, loads of drugs, and B, loads of guns? I didn't realise that they travelled, him and his gang with guns.
Hey, listen, when he turned up at the White House, famously, when is that? 71 or 72? I can't remember. When he just turns up at the White House completely unannounced with one of his, people, and demands to see Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
He is carrying firearms. He wants to take a gun in and give it to the President of the United States. It has to be gently explained to him, you're not going to do that. You know what I mean? You can't take firearms into the White House. But that was just his thing. In the book, actually, in the book that Guralnick's written about Parker and Elvis, they talk about when there was a potential assassination threat when he was playing in Las Vegas, which he took seriously. They'd had various anonymous notes saying somebody will try to shoot him during a performance or whatever. And Elvis took to the stage that night with a small pistol in either boot. Just absolutely.
As if someone's going to loose off a firearm and he's going to whip out a pistol.
There was going to be a kind of Clint Eastwood kind of gunplay during an American trilogy or something. Absolutely.
Full of amazing details. One of the details, my favourite detail about Colonel Tom Parker in that conversation with Peter Guralnick, was how the Colonel, who was a massive gambler and obsessed with earning cash, partly so he could just make sure he could lose it, I think, had a game called Honesty. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And the game of Honesty was that he would think of a number and you had to guess what number he was thinking of. And if you were right, he'd give you some cash.
Yeah.
that was his game. You can't lose, can you?
They will say gamblers will gamble on two flies screwing up a window. No,
yeah.
And he would clearly do that. But I've been thinking about this whole thing about Elvis not really wanting to go anywhere other than the United States is at root the most American thing about him. That's a deeply American thing. I always think the most sweeping generalization coming up here, but, take it for what it is. In my experience, the most sophisticated people you meet in the world are Americans who traveled a lot because they understand America and they understand the rest of the world. The least sophisticated people you meet in the world are Americans who haven't traveled because they don't even know that they know America because they've got nothing to compare it with.
Yeah.
What's that old saying? What shall ye know of England who only England know? It's that kind of idea. And Elvis just had no interest in the world beyond America. It just didn't exist for him.
Well, he probably fell out of his comfort zone, didn't he?
Well, yeah, but that must apply to loads of people.
Yeah, but he was so American, he couldn't deal with the concept of anything other than very American food and American culture, American manners. And he just, you couldn't imagine him surviving if you dropped in the middle of France. What would he do?
No, but it could be at the same time. That's what people love about it.
Yeah.
They love the Americanness of him,
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have worked if he was in any way cosmopolitan.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's Peter Guralnick's book about Elvis and the Colonel.
Who else did we talk to? Justin Curry.
Justin Curry
was great. Justin Curry of Delamitri was really, really,
really good. Really
interesting.
Good.
He's written this book about touring and about the rhythm of life on the road. And I thought his observations about one thing he said was, he said, never leave the boat. He said, never leave the bubble. If you're on tour, don't interact with real life because it will destabilize you. You've got to remain in this combat ready state of kind of part adrenaline all the time. so you're able to perform. I thought it made me realize just how unbelievably stressful that must be. And then the whole thing about coming off tour and trying to decompress and go back to normal life. And I felt very sympathetic. He was great.
He was very
As
good.
was Brett McKenzie. Brett McKenzie, he of Flight of the Conchords, who just was so enthusiastic, wasn't he? So keen to talk to us and so keen to talk about, he talked a bit about Flight of the Conchords, but he mostly talked about the business of writing for movies and the whole idea of writing for animated movies, writing for the Muppets, writing for The Simpsons, writing for things like Minecraft, and what it's like when you're given a brief. I thought that was very attractive because songwriters are mostly getting up in the morning and thinking, I need to write a song, I'm waiting for some kind of inspiration. But if someone says to you, I need a song, and they're really specific briefs, aren't they? One of the briefs he got was that they had a film as a Minecraft movie that had Holding Out for a Hero was the song that they had as a placekeeper, and they couldn't get clearance for it. So they'd already shot this bit of the film, and he had to write a song that had the same BPM as Holding Out for the Hero, and it had the same hi-hat emphases at exactly the same point because something happened at that point. And he said, you get 2 days to do this. And I thought that was really fantastic. 2 days to write a song about a unicorn that has a dream, or a donkey that wants to be a star.
It also writes a lot of stuff for the film business and for theatre or whatever.
Yeah.
Which given the nature of film and the theatre, a lot of it just doesn't happen. There's great plans to do this, that, and the other, and they don't come to fruition. And so he worked for a year, did he say, on a Paddington Bear musical?
Oh, but, yeah.
Which then didn't happen. So, if you want a load of songs about bears and marmalade, he's got them. He's got a drawer full of them.
He said, I couldn't really reuse them. He said, I got one song which has so many rhymes for Peru. You can't really make it into anything else, He was great. He was really good.
He was very good indeed. And at this point, when reminding you of the fantastic wealth of stuff we do, now's as good a time as any to make sure that you subscribe, if that's available to you. I don't know if you're following this on audio as a podcast or possibly on YouTube or whatever. Just make sure you hit that subscribe button and also the like button, because those things do make a difference to the way the machine treats us. And if you feel particularly warmly disposed to us, who knows, we may have brightened your day already. You could choose to express that in pecuniary fashion by going to patreon.com/word in your ear and seeing how you might become one of our much valued Patreon subscribers, supporters. And if you did that at the right level, you could be joining us on the occasion of your birthday to throw a log on the Word in Your Ear fire. And let's see who's doing that this week.
The Word Podcast, driving the digital kids to school since 2007.
Well, as you know, our top tier, most loyal subscribers on the occasion of their birthday get to join in the conversation with a conversational gambit. And this is the turn of David Cook. David, very nice to see you and happy birthday.
Thank you.
What is it you wanted to discuss?
Well, my conversational log is actually, Mark, it's inspired by your very fine memoir here. I was flipping through ages ago. It was actually a conversational log recycled from last year because I had to cancel at the last minute. But chapter 22 of your book is literally a laugh out loud telling of your experience in the Lake District with Roy Harper and Jimmy Page. And having watched the footage again and read the chapter again last night, I couldn't help but to conclude afterwards, is it ever possible to listen to Led Zeppelin ever again after that? And I think the two of you, after so many years in the trade, are you able to look past the cocaine and wine-fueled artist to just appreciate the art? I think ultimately, I'm sure you've had some experiences, encounters with artists over the years that either, for better or for worse, forever colored your ability to appreciate their music. And I'd love to hear a few highlights.
Oh gosh. Well, can I just make a comment about that? I'm rather regretful about that whole thing, actually, because when you do an interview, and Dave will agree with it, when you do an interview with somebody, you only tend to see it at first from your own point of view. You just think, well, I really suffered, and they were very lofty and rather gave us the impression that we were lucky to be graced with their presence at all. But I think from their point of view, I feel a bit bad looking back at it, really, because Roy Harper was offered the old grey whistle test and we turned him down. And then they came back and said, what if I bring my friend Jimmy Page? And we went, oh, well, that'd be great.
Right over. Yeah.
And we go along. And, poor old Roy is a bit conflicted because he's thinking, well, I'm kind of underrated and unloved, and they're only interested in Jimmy. And Jimmy was offered, both of them incredibly unconfident. I realise now that Jimmy Page was just thinking, do I have a career? This was 3 or 4 years after the death of John Bonham. He didn't know what he was going to do with his life. And when the producer said to me, get loads of stuff about Led Zeppelin out of Jimmy Page. So I'm asking him about, which they both become really defensive. Roy got extremely pissed off because nobody was interested in him. It was meant to be all about him. Yeah. And Jimmy got very, very defensive and a bit aggressive. And so it all went a bit funny, really. But no, I mean, I've got over it. You just forget about it.
After how many years have you got over it?
40 years.
Is it more than 40 years?
No, it's 40 years, isn't it? No, I got over it a long time ago. But
40 years, you're still talking about it. You're still thinking about it, actually. And, Mark will go to bed tonight and he will wake up in the middle of the night, snap into a fetal position under the duvet, because suddenly looming before him will be the face of Roy Harper and the bleating of a distant sheep. Those things,
and the fact that that's on YouTube.
That's the worst thing. And of course, it never goes away.
No, it's on YouTube. So
I haven't actually seen that in years. I remember Mark telling me about it when it happened. And what I think is an interesting case of is the kind of thing that I never volunteer for. Never volunteer to ever deal with a rock star when they're out of their comfort zone. And this happens a lot. So if you take somebody up a hillside or whatever, they're out of their comfort zone. If you do an interview in a record shop in front of a load of buyers, they're out of the comfort zone. And these people have a very narrow comfort zone. Jimmy Page is fine when he's on stage being Jimmy Page, ideally with Led Zeppelin. It doesn't go a lot farther than that. And so if you throw him into the average, averagely demanding social situation, go to a wedding or whatever, or make a short speech or whatever, can't do it. Literally can't do it. These people cannot do it. And the way they deal with it is taking it out on the poor sod, in Mark's case, him, who is there to kind of mediate between them and the outside world. You know what I mean? And I know loads of people, that's happened to me occasionally, but I know loads of people who say, they get asked to, could you go and interview Ginger Baker or whatever in front of a load of people at the NFT? Nope. And they regret it for the rest of their bloody life.
That's a really good example because that's in public. And the trouble there is that the rock star is kind of tends to go, well, here I am. Yes. You've got to do all the work. You've got to draw the performance out of me. I'm just going to sit here and just be fabulous. I've done my bit. I've just turned up. Yeah. And of course, that means that it's very, very hard to get a big performance out of this person. And it always looks like your fault for failing. It's hard.
And they are the only group of people on God's earth who, when you put them in front of their fans, can say anything at all, and somebody's going to find it hilarious.
Yeah.
Bands just say the gauchiest things, and everybody just laughs because it's the band saying it. They wouldn't laugh if it was anybody else saying it, And that's a kind of case of that, But I mean, go to your bigger question. Was it put you off, people? In the short term, it might have done.
You didn't listen to any Dylan records for a while, Dave, after you...
Well, not really. I don't think that's...
Be honest.
I don't think that would... Well, it might have done, but, that's water off a duck's back, really. And if you deal with... you're dealing with these people now, 30, 40 years later, it's all very different.
Sure.
Because... they're kind of pleased to see you.
Oh, yeah.
They're kind of less competitive. They're less kind of, what's the adjective? They're less chippy.
Yeah, and that's Jimmy. They've calmed down. They're just glad to be still around and that people are still interested in them. Whereas at the time, they were intensely competitive.
Sure.
And
certainly
nervous.
Jimmy Page has mellowed a little bit. He's sort of
has.
Gandalf of classic rock. He's very kind of nice.
But imagine being Jimmy Page. You labor in the kind of the salt mines of session work for years and years and years, and then you suddenly blunder into the spotlight for 10 years, and then for the rest of his life, it's never quite as good as it was then, is it?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably really hard to deal with if you're Jimmy Page.
Because I think at that time, I never realised really, but he must have just been getting up in the morning and thinking, what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
Literally, what am I going to do? I can't reform Led Zeppelin because nobody appears to want to.
No.
I don't know what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go up this mountain in the light drizzle with Roy Harper and get massively pissed the night before. But
are we capable of getting over? If you deal with Van Morrison, he's no picnic. He would never be confused with a ray of sunshine. And but does it put you off listening to Van Morrison? No, not at all. Because you accept that they have an artistic persona.
Yeah,
they just and they carry that artistic persona around with them, and
also you realise that a lot of those cases that it is just an act, Yeah. I interviewed Lou Reed, and I realise now that I thought, God, he's appalling. He's so difficult and so chilly and so cold and manipulative. But his being cold and manipulative was just a way of guaranteeing that he was going to get a certain amount of coverage.
Sure.
And that coverage he was just operating as the kind of cartoon character that the press to some extent built him into.
And that was Lou Reed's classic case, because for years I used to remark about this. He'd come over to Britain. Whenever he had a new record out, it would unfailingly come to Britain and hire a PR man whose job it was to get him in a hotel room with a load of British journalists who he would then affect to despise.
Yeah. They all love it. Go away and go, he's brilliant.
Yeah.
The Ice King.
It was a complete act, If Lou Reed wasn't being snotty with British journalists in a suite at a hotel, he had a wasted day as far as he was concerned. So
any positives? I mean, did you ever meet somebody? I had an encounter with Bob Mould once upon a time that has I still think about it every time I listen to his music. Is there anybody who?
Well, was that a bad one or a good one?
No, it's positive. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
But
so by positive, what do you mean? Do you mean he just acted like a normal civil human being?
Yeah. No, I mean, beyond that. I mean,
right.
By the time you were sitting in a field with Messrs. Harper and Page, I was, an adolescent in Toronto, and this is when I fell in love with Husker Du, and I've loved Bob Mould for ever since, and all of his bands, Sugar, and all of his phases, Electronica, and he played. I've lost track of the number of times I've seen him, but he used to play here a lot more. He lived here for a while in Portland, but he played a show in a now defunct venue. To get in and out, you had to go through this flight of steps, and he performed a fantastic show. And at the end of it, lo and behold, the man himself is at the top of the stairs, thanking and chatting with every person who left.
Well, that's brilliant.
That's the way you should do it.
I mean, yeoman's work for the fans. And you wouldn't do that because you had to, because you don't. You'd either do it because you wanted to, or again, some respect for the
I think it's increasingly the case that
it really is.
People don't mind doing that kind of thing.
No, and also they appreciate how far people have travelled and how much they've paid.
They do.
There's the merch table over here, just in case
just in case you're tempted. But no, I think they make an effort now.
They all understand. They don't take it for granted anymore because the deal used to be, and if you go back to the 70s and 80s or whatever, the deal was, I'm here. The way you express your affection is you buy my records, now bugger off. That's the end of the relationship. Doesn't work like that anymore. Doesn't work. They want you to come back.
I'm going to stay signing things till 11 o'clock.
Stay signing things and join.
Go back to my Premier Inn and hit the hay alone.
So the news, what we've gathered from this is, generally speaking, rock stars nowadays are a lot more civilized than they used to be. They are compared to how they used to be. They're little rays of sunshine. So
they are.
That's our learning.
Even Roy Harper.
Even Roy Harper.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.